There comes a single moment in everyone's life
Questions have arisen, such as who is he, what is he, where did he come from, is he a creature of a foreign power?
where they must face a choice of who they are going to become. They can either burn the old version of themselves or fall back into the patterns that were instilled in them since birth. A defining moment in every individual story. A moment so powerful, it reshapes how you see yourself and the world around you. And it ties back to a single question philosophers have been debating for centuries. Who are you, really? The ancient Greeks believed identity was fixed at birth, destined. Eastern philosophers argued the self was an illusion entirely, that underneath all the layers there was nothing permanent to find. And then there was a musician by the name of David Bowie, who believed something different from all of them. And no one truly understood what that was until that night in 1973, standing on the stage at the height of his career, at the peak of everything. He killed the very thing that made him famous. Most of us spend our entire lives searching for one fixed answer to who they are. But maybe the question was never meant to have one. Maybe it was always meant to have three. And to understand what David Bowie did that night, we need to go back to the very first version of yourself. The one that existed before you had any say in it. Your past. For as long as I can remember, I had always been obsessed with cameras. I always had one on me, documenting, filming, any chance I got, really. I never really questioned it, why I liked making videos. I always just thought that's who I was. It wasn't until I was watching some old family videos and realized my dad was always the one behind the camera also, and my grandparents had owned several. The camera was always around me. It was just part of how our family existed in the world, so inevitably, I grew to love it. And that's when I realized so much of who you think you are today is simply patterns that have been passed down from generations before you. Maybe for you, it's music. You grew up in a household that played 80s music. So naturally, you became someone who enjoyed 80s music. And every single person on this planet has a set of inherited patterns they've grown to accept as their own. Athletes like Lionel Messi, influenced by his grandmother and father to pick up a football at the age of 4. Elvis Presley, raised in a church surrounded by gospel music before he ever played a guitar. Steven Spielberg, whose father used a home movie camera constantly, shaping a son who would go on to change cinema forever. They weren't born knowing who they'd become. They inherited their first draft. January 8th, 1947. David Robert Jones is born. Before he'd ever become one of the most influential artists of all time, his first draft was also inherited. One of his major influences early on in his life was his half-brother Terry Burns, who was the first to introduce him to music far beyond mainstream rock, particularly modern jazz. Music had always been something that connected the two, but that connection didn't come without a cost, because Bowie hadn't just inherited Terry's love for music. He inherited something far worse, something that would haunt him for the rest of his career. But for now, he was just a kid trying to find his place in the world. He would spend the next few years floundering on the edge of success, multiple failed bands, a sound that didn't quite fit him. Nothing truly landed. Part of the problem with Bowie's inability to break through in the 60s was exactly what would propel him to the huge success the following decade. Himself. Bowie had always been in a constant battle with his identity. Even as a teen, he never really seemed to fit in. The coming years would prove that he never truly knew who he was. So if it wasn't through finding himself that created the star, what did? But everyone wants to find themselves. I know I did. When I was 14, my parents gifted me a camera for the first time, and I thought this was it. I thought I finally figured out who I was. And that excitement is what drove me to start making my own YouTube videos. But is this it? Will I forever just be known as the camera guy? The person who's already figured himself out? Because that's the danger of finding yourself. The intent isn't wrong. It's dangerous because it operates on the belief that there is a fixed self waiting to be found, and once it's found, that's you, complete. When really you've only discovered your first draft, the patterns you've inherited, and some of them hold you back in ways you can't even see, because you've wrapped your identity around them so tightly that questioning them feels like questioning yourself. But David Bowie refused to mistake his first draft for his final version. He could have accepted who he was when he was 15, playing saxophone in his first band, the Conrads, just another kid who loved music, but never seemed destined to become a star. Instead, he kept changing, kept refusing to let one version of himself become permanent. And that's the difference between finding yourself and creating yourself. One assumes you're complete, the other understands you're a work in progress. And it brings you one step closer to truly answering the question, who are you, really? Some would argue that there are multiple versions of yourself, one that shows up differently depending on who you're with. And maybe that's true, or maybe they're all performances. For the longest time, I thought I was trying to discover who I really was, until I realized David Bowie had spent his entire life doing the opposite.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
2, 1.
The astronauts are hoping for better luck than 2 weeks ago.
2 astronauts who will make the landing on the moon.
The world waited, curious, wondering.
Space travel dominated popular culture in the late 60s ahead of the first mission to land on the moon. Millions of people were watching, anticipating to see if humanity could do something we'd never done before. And that fascination is what drove Stanley Kubrick to direct one of the most influential movies of our generation, 2001: A Space Odyssey. And when David Bowie saw it for the first time, it inspired him to write his breakout hit, Space Oddity. It was his first song to truly go mainstream, but more importantly, it was the birth of his first ever persona, Major Tom, an astronaut who becomes untethered from his spacecraft and drifts alone into the vast emptiness of space. The song has been interpreted in many different ways, but one interpretation has always fascinated me, that it wasn't really about escaping Earth. It was about David's desire to escape from himself, or perhaps who he feared he might become. His half-brother Terry, he was the person who introduced him to music, the person he admired the most growing up. He once said he wanted to be just like him, until something changed. Terry developed schizophrenia. By the early 1970s, his mental state had declined so badly that he was admitted to a mental hospital, where he'd ultimately spend the rest of his days. So seeing how his brother slowly disappeared, David feared the worst. He might be watching a future that was waiting for him. And from that point on, whether he knew it consciously or not, Bowie stopped asking, "Who am I?" and started asking, "Who am I becoming?" And because of this, Major Tom was born, a deliberate reconstruction of identity, a conscious escape from the self he feared he'd inherited. But this was only the first persona. After that came Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, Halloween Jack, the Thin White Duke, each one consciously constructed, each one eventually shed when it stopped serving who he was becoming. Because you are always becoming someone. In some ways, you're always performing. Most people perform for others. They put on a different personality depending on who they're with. But the real question is, who are you performing for yourself? Because when no one is watching, you go right back to playing the same character. And that's where Bowie was different. He was terrified his inheritance would become his identity, that he'd remain the kid drifting from band to band, never finding a voice that felt like his. Hanging over all of it was the fear of becoming what he'd watch happen to Terry. So every new persona was trying to fight against the idea that his first draft was permanent. Most of us do the exact opposite. We inherit patterns and habits and repeat them long enough that we start using them to defend ourselves. We inherit anxiety and call ourselves anxious. We inherit procrastination and call ourselves lazy. We inherit fear and call ourselves introverted. So Bowie performed to challenge the person he'd inherited. We perform to protect them. So how do you stop performing as the person you've always been? You interrupt the automatic. Something completely outside of your normal patterns. Something that forces you to observe what you've been doing on autopilot, and maybe that's the point. Maybe you don't discover who you are by looking deeper. Maybe you discover it by stripping everything away you never consciously chose. The inherited habits, the patterns, the labels you've been defending, until all that's left is the part of you that gets to choose. And that brings us back to the night of 1973. Hammersmith Odeon. Thousands of people had come to see Ziggy Stardust one last time. They just didn't know it yet. At the end of the show, Bowie stepped up to the microphone and said, "Not only is this the last show of the tour, it's the last show we'll ever do." The audience thought David Bowie was retiring, but he wasn't. He was killing Ziggy Stardust. The world was shocked. Ziggy had been the vessel behind one of the most meteoric rises to fame in pop culture history. Why would he end it all now? At the peak of his career, it was because Bowie refused to let even his greatest success become another prison. By 1973, Bowie felt trapped by Ziggy. Every interview was about Ziggy. Every show expected Ziggy. Even his own band assumed Ziggy was who they'd be for the rest of their careers. But Bowie never treated identity like something you found once. He treated it like something you continuously rewrote. Every version of himself had an expiration date, even the successful ones. And when you begin to see identity this way, your first draft loses its authority because it was only ever meant to be a starting point, not a destination. And that's where your chosen self begins. One of my favorite movies of all time is called Into the Wild. It follows the true story of a young adventurer by the name of Chris McCandless who decided to move out of his hometown, change his name, and began hitchhiking across America. His story sparked controversy, with many people questioning why. Just why would he ever decide to do such a thing? And I think the answer has everything to do with the question I've been trying to answer this entire video. Who are you, really? Because Chris didn't leave to find himself. He distanced from himself, from society, from the patterns, the habits, from the life he'd been living automatically, to see who he could become by revealing everything that he was. Although this is an extreme case, for many of us, distancing comes in the form of changing cities, leaving a job, solo traveling, even something as small as changing your morning routine. But distancing only creates space. It doesn't tell you who to become. That's the second mistake people make. They think the chosen self arrives as a revelation, but it arrives through pursuit. There's a Mexican artist named Frida Kahlo who was 18 years old when a bus accident left her bedridden for months. By every measure, her life had given her every reason to stop wanting anything. Instead, she started painting. There was no moment of clarity that led her to this. She never thought she was going to be an artist. The identity of one came through the act of pursuit. And that's exactly what the chosen self is. Not a discovery, but an accumulation. Every conscious choice becomes another brushstroke until one day you look back and realize you've become someone your younger self never could have imagined. And now I think we can finally answer the question we started with. Who are you, really? Your identity was always supposed to be made up of threes: your past, your present, and your future. Beginning, middle, and end. Your inherited self, the first draft you never chose. the performed self, the version of you you've rehearsed until it felt permanent, and the chosen self, the only version that actually belongs to you, the person built from the choices you made after questioning everything automatic. So maybe the question, who are you, was flawed to begin with, because you are never someone. You are always someone becoming. There's a single moment in everyone's life where they face the choice of who they are going to become. Some protect the first draft, but we burned it. The question is, what will you choose?